the thing protecting you from the rain with a cup of hot chocolate and a tiny little dog running around.
I like your vision better than the reality. That's nice.
I know. Just imagine what people think of me in Switzerland. They think, we're all eating chocolate and skiing, but nope.
No, that's what I think. Yeah, absolutely.
No. If I could show you if I showed you right out the window right now, I live in something called the Quartier, and it's basically just a block of buildings set up like military barracks. It's not very glamorous, but there are parts of Switzerland which are very glamorous, but definitely not where I am.
Well, I'm back in London at the moment, and
where are you in London?
I'm in North London, although the background here, I believe, is our Pearson office is it in Singapore? Possibly. It's just a backdrop. Yeah.
Well, it seems to be very popular because I've seen other people use that. And obviously, our other offices must not look as glamorous as this one.
No, Singapore office is the place to be. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because officially, I guess we could call this the Pearson Ham offices, because this is
absolutely
this is the office in Ham. Well, it's actually not. It's my home, but it's where I've worked even before we were in home office, because I always have been in home office. But so if you're in North London and Mike's in South London, are you guys like, if you send a homing pigeon over, could he fly directly over to you?
Well, the great thing about pigeons and as the crow flies or as the pigeon flies is, yes, it's all just direct, because they don't have to worry about things in the way, do they? Yeah.
That's true. But maybe there's that big, huge, giant skyscraper that they have to go around.
Well, working. Fly higher, so.
Oh, well, and on that note, I think, fly higher is our motivating factor here in Pearson, and how we can engage our students with all of our exciting new materials. And for those of you who are wondering what I'm doing, I'm just blabbering on until the next minute passes, and now we can go. So Imogen, over to you.
Yeah,
I need to turn you into a host.
Share my screen. Thank you.
Okay, excuse me. Sorry, I keep forgetting to do that. I don't know what's wrong with me. Yes.
There we go. Okay, let's.
And then I can spotlight you too.
So we need this one. Good, excellent. So thank you. Has that actually worked? No, sorry.
Nothing shared yet.
I know, I realized I didn't press enough buttons. I think that, are you seeing my
yes
presentation? Perfect. Brilliant. Well, hello everybody. My name's Imogen. I'm one of the product managers with Pearson ELT in the adult. I look after some of our adult and business titles. Today I'm going to talk about ESAP, so Pearson's online methodology, and Roadmap, our new adult title, and how this combination can help you make impactful and effective lessons in any teaching environment. There we go. But before we start, we're going to have a little game. You are going to have to use the chat box quite a bit in this session, so please do open up the chat box. 2 of these statements are true. I'd like you to try and guess. You know nothing about me. Well, now you know a little about me because we had a chat, Mary and I, earlier. But which of these do you think is incorrect? Classic guessing game. This year I have baked a lot of bread, got a new pet, and started kayaking. So guesses for 1, guesses for 3. Yep, this is the lockdown cliche trio. Bake a bread, get a new pet, start a new hobby. Got guesses for them all. The correct answer is number 2. I have baked a lot of bread, but I baked a lot of bread before. I have not got a new pet because, as Mary was suggesting, I kind of live in 2 places at the moment, so it's not really fair to move an animal around. And yes, I have started kayaking. I bought 2 kayaks. I haven't taken them out once, but I think that counts as starting. It's early days. They're very old and very heavy, but they were cheap. So this is the sort of activity you can do with students. So have students write sentences about themselves and guess which ones are right and wrong. It means that the students get to practice a bit of writing, a bit of reading. They get to know their classmates. Nice icebreaker at the start of class. Another icebreaker. So here's a sentence about me. My name is Imogen. I'm from Scotland. I like walking. Obviously, these are personal and could be changed. So can you use the chat box and write your version? And then if you find someone who's got something in common, pop that in the chat box too. Right, so we've got Susan from England and swimming. We've got Mary, oh, Lord of the Rings. So there we go. Rachel and Susan, you've got being from England and coming, so you're both from England. Maybe we could ask follow-up questions. What part are you from? Oh gosh, it's going fast now. We've got Kieran from Northern Ireland, Cinema, Regine. Oh, your dad's from Scotland. There we go. We found something in common. That's lovely. From Germany, but lived in England for 10 years. Brilliant. So we've got lots of walkers here, lots of people from different parts of the British Isles, lots of people who used to live there but don't anymore. Well, welcome everybody. Again, it's the sort of thing that is quite fun to do with students at the beginning of a session, or certainly the beginning of a course. So today, what are we going to be looking at? So what is ESAP? What is roadmap? And then bringing the two together. So we're going to look at teaching an ESAP lesson with roadmap. I've put questions at the end here, but I will look at the chat. So if there's questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat box. When I did this session the other day, I ran out of time. So I would like to ask you a question. Which of these are you most interested to hear about? And I'll go fast through the rest. Are you so hearing about roadmap, about the course? So I'll just do a quick recap of ESAP then. Anybody else want to make a comment? Number 3. So yep, okay, great. Make sure we have time for that. Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. I'll go very fast through what is ESAP. We'll talk about what is roadmap, and then we'll get on to the lesson. Fabulous. Okay, so what is ESAP? It's a methodology. This is a little history. So basically, it's picking up on the methodologies that have been standard through ELT for the past sort of 20, 30 years. We're building on one that Jeremy Harmer included in his Practice of English Teaching, which is now in its 5th edition. This is the first. I just love the cover of the original edition, so I have to add it in. And ESA there was Engage, Study, Activate, and was basically a way of moving on from PPP a little bit, adding some engagement, a little bit more human context. And what we've done this year is update that for an online context. So we will go through this very quickly, but I appreciate this is not why most people are here. So the purpose is, as people shift online, I know you're well past that point now, but initially there's the idea of panic almost. I think most people experience initially, how do I do what I do online? And then a question of, okay, so how do I do it efficiently and how do I do it effectively? How do I make sure that my lesson will be well structured? So this ESAP methodology is simply putting a structure around an online lesson. So it's dividing it into 4 sections, E, S, A, P. So first up, we've got E, which is engage. This is a warm up, a personal connection. So the sorts of things that we did in the icebreakers at the beginning. You can try and connect with them on a personal level, really. So how are you feeling? What have you done since the last lesson? This kind of thing. And then there's the next phase of that is a retrieval practice based on the previous lesson. Again, the sorts of things that I'm sure you do in a face-to-face lesson. So you can use the chat box again. The chat box is such a fantastic tool. So you could have a student define a word from the previous lesson and then the other students have to guess what it is. Or you could use the private messaging function. So in the chat box, at the bottom of the chat box, it says to, and you can decide whether you're writing to just the host. So in this case, it would be me or Mary, or whether you're writing to everybody. So you can have the students write just to you and answer a question. So what's your favorite way to relax, maybe? And then if you say, okay, this person said it's doing yoga, then the rest of the class have to guess who said that. Obviously that works with a small class who know each other best, but different ways to use the chat box for warmers. And then the final thing about the engage session is activating knowledge for the upcoming lesson. So activating schemata, we used to say. So you want to know what they already know, and also just get the bits of their brain thinking about the context and the language that they already have. So ways to do this, examples: if the lesson's on emotions, you could have them add any emotions in the chat box. Fine, simple. Or you could say, all right, so your basic emotions, happy, sad, angry, what other words do you know? You've got 10 seconds to think about it and type them in the chat box. But don't do anything until I say go. So the students would all type away. Oh, we've got lots of different ones. Type, 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 type. And then after your 10 seconds or 15 seconds, you say, right, time's up. We're going to count down, and then everybody click together. So you go 3, 2, 1, go. And then you get everybody's emotions pouring into the chat box at once. So Mary's given us 1, which is fabulous. Thank you. But the point about this sort of thing is that you're asking everyone, all students, to engage at once and think individually, and they all have to work rather than the same sort of 2 people answering all the time. So you get a better sense of where the whole class is. Plus it adds a little bit of fun. There's lots of ways to do this sort of thing. There's one example. Right, E for engage. S is for study. So this is where we'd have the lesson input, the kind of meat of the lesson. You're going to be probably using screen share in your online lessons. I'll be sharing, well, PowerPoint now, and then later the presentation tool. But you probably don't want to keep this on the whole time. There are a lot of points in the lessons where you want all of the students to be able to see each other. And unless they have multiple screens, that's really hard with a screen share on. So at any point in the lesson where you're asking students to engage with each other, it really helps if they can see each other. So taking the screen share off and asking students to put their camera on is really important. The next point is avoiding TTTs, teacher talking time. Always good practice in any class, but even more tricky, I think, in an online class. Long periods where the teacher's just talking is probably long periods where your students are not active. So having a variety of task types, trying to keep all students as active as possible all the way through. You might ask students to participate regularly. So I might say, Deborah or Dolores, what's the answer to this one? But if they're talking, then what are all of the other students doing? So trying to find as many ways as possible to keep every student engaged at all times. So they can be things like the 3, 2, 1, go that we talked about, or as one person's talking, have other students typing in the chat box, do you agree? Did you have a different answer? Can you add anything else? Just making sure that you're asking all students to think at the same time. The next point in this phase is giving students time to think. So online, there's always a bit of a lag, but even in face-to-face classrooms, we can feel pressured as teachers to fill the silence. So you ask a student a question and then just jump in with the answer, or go to the student who you know always has the answer, without really giving the class or the students who need a bit more time to think, time to process. It's somebody said recently that apparently teachers tend to give the best students more time to think and the slowest students least time to think, presumably because you have confidence that they'll get there eventually. Anyway, just something to think about. Finally, feedback is really important. So you can use a whiteboard for whole class feedback, but the chat box, again, the chat box is just fantastic for online classes, for whole class or for individual. Good, so ES, and still got plenty of time, excellent. The next, there we go. Excuse me. So the next part is activate. So this is essentially your freer production. And where in an online class, unless you've got one-to-one students or 2 or 3 students, you're probably going to want to use breakout rooms. The thing to mention here is that giving clear instructions and checking those instructions becomes, I mean, it's always important, and you'd always, I'm sure, use concept checks and check that your students know what they're doing. But in an online classroom with breakout rooms, it's even more important. Otherwise, you drop into the breakout rooms, and only once you've gone round 2 or 3 do you realise that your students don't know what they're doing. So it's super important to check that they know what the tasks are. We'll hopefully have time to talk about and look at a few examples of that in a little while. If you want students to have something to say, it really helps to make the tasks as personal as possible. They can talk about themselves or their opinion, or And finally, if this is activating, this is the section where you provide the opportunity for them to use the language that they've just learned. And if you want them to actually use it, then it really helps to encourage that. Otherwise, there's a tendency to fall back on the vocabulary that they already know or ways that they already know to communicate. So one way might be, rather than breaking them into pairs, put students in threes and have 2 students doing the communicative task, and then that third person is a listener, and they're working with a list of your key phrases or particular techniques that you've been working on, and have them just tick the number of times they hear each one. That means that the talking pair are really aware that they're going to be judged on it, so they'll make more effort to actually use them. Obviously, if you do that, you'd want to run the task again to allow the listening student to be able to talk as well. So it'll maybe take a bit more time, but well worth it. ISA, yes, so the bit that we've added is P for practice. It's the stage that students do after the lesson, so you could just say homework. We're calling it practice, and we're talking really about the online practice in an interactive exercise in an online environment. So this is where students do the activities themselves and they get feedback, usually pretty instantly. Scoring is automatic, and the work that the students do are reported. And teachers can then go on and check their student performance online. So you can go in, see how all your students did, and get something like a common error report maybe, and use that to work on the next lesson. And obviously this saves on marking, because you don't have to, do the marking at home or spend the next 15 minutes just checking you got it right and wrong. You can see that. Good, all right, 15 minutes in, and that is our summary of ESAP. So hopefully there was at least something that was useful there. Let's have a quick look at Roadmap. What is Roadmap? So it's our new 8-level course. It goes from A1 to C1, or just up into C2. And it's a completely GSE based syllabus. So I believe you've heard from Mike Mayer this morning around the GSE. So Roadmap was built entirely from the GSE syllabus. This means that the syllabus progresses smoothly from, through the levels and within a level, and that every lesson has a very clear outcome. When we carried out the research for Roadmap, there were a lot of surveys and a lot of interviews with teachers, with institutions, with students, and we heard what, you know, everybody knows. Adults learn English for a lot of different reasons, and they have a lot of different goals and contexts for learning. So some students need to write reports for work. Some students want to be able to speak to business colleagues in English. Some students are here for an exam, to pass an exam. Some students are at university and need to be able to understand lectures in English or write long essays. And then some are there for social purposes. They want to understand Netflix better and read social media posts in English or travel. But across all of these conversations, there's one need that unifies all learners, and that's to be able to competently speak to others and understand them in return. So communication. And along with that, they need the underlying grammar and vocabulary. So at Pearson, we call those the enabling skills, that kind of base knowledge that makes the communicative outcome possible. So all students need speaking, and all students need a kind of basic competence in reading, listening, and writing. But the need for more specific or in-depth skills in reading, writing, and listening is very mixed. And that makes managing a mixed class quite tricky from a teacher's perspective. So what Roadmap did was create this dual track approach. And when you look at the print book, you'll see that, if I stick my laser pointer on, there we go. If you look at the print book, you'll see that quite clearly here. It's divided into two sections. At the front of the book, there are core lessons for each of the 10 units. This is what we're calling a fast track route for shorter courses. The fast track route has 3 speaking lessons in every unit, and then it's got an English in action, that's functional language, and then a review. These work slightly different at the upper levels, but essentially that's the pattern. And every lesson is built on a GCSE speaking learning objective and builds up to the students demonstrating that they can do that objective in a final speaking task. The 3 speaking lessons include the grammar and vocabulary that are going to be useful to students in that final task. The lessons, they have some reading and listening and writing, but it tends to be kind of incidental rather than focused development. That is in the extended route, the develop your lessons at the back. So that's the shaded section if you look at the spine of the book. Every unit has 1 lesson for reading, for listening, for writing. Again, the lesson is built on a GCSE LO or a GCSE can do. And it will include really in-depth focus on a specific sub-skill so that whatever students are learning, it's not just relevant for that text or audio piece or whatever, but is genuinely transferable to other contexts. The other thing to mention about the extended route is that the develop your lessons is that they start with a little communicative lead-in, so a conversation, and then at the end there's another sort of speaking opportunity to talk about the theme of the lesson. But the rest of it, the bulk of it, is written so that it can be easily done at home or in class. And that means that it's super flexible. You can cover it with all your, or group your students in class, or you can have them do it at home. And it'll work nicely either way. The teacher's book will have suggestions for more communicative versions of the bulk of the class, or, you know, I'm sure you can think of ways to add that. Okay, so that's the kind of structure of the course. We've got the speaking and the core lessons at the front, and then the extended skills at the back. How does a lesson work? Well, every lesson, as we said, is built around a GCSE learning objective. So this is a B1 example. You can see here the GCSE learning objective. This is a little screenshot from the teacher's book. So the teacher's book gives you the full GCSE objective, can talk about past events or experiences using simple language. And then in the student's book, we just simplify it, describe past experiences. So in fact, no, I'm going to go back there a second. So basically the authors would start with the objective. Okay, I want them to be able to talk about past events or experiences. Great. How am I going to do that? What is the task that they will do at the end in order to show that they can do this thing? In this case, they're going to tell their partner, sorry, it's very small font, I'm peering at it. It's very small very small font. It is small font. What was I saying? In this case, they're going to tell their partner about a story in the past. So they're basically going to build a story and then narrate it. So the authors would then think, all right, and what language are they going to need to do that? Here, they're going to look at the past simple and past continuous and how they work together. And they're going to have vocabulary for feelings and events. So what happened and how did you feel about it? In other words, all of the input builds to that final task. Other things to notice, there's always a model, usually a listening, so that students know what's expected of them. And then there's a prepare activity, which gives students time to kind of think about what they're going to say, take notes, etc. So every lesson really works towards that GCSE objective, and this super clear lesson structure will help to build students' confidence, and it'll make them, give them the greatest opportunity to actually achieve the outcome and feel like they're really making progress. The develop your skills lessons have a similar ethos. They work in a very slightly different way because they've got a speaking at the end after you've completed the thing. But again, it's built around it's built around a GCSE learning objective, and everything works together to help students achieve that. Okay, so we know what ESAP is, we know what roadmap is, and now we're going to look at how we might put them into practice in a lesson. So we're going to look at a lesson from roadmap. And first of all, I've planned my lesson. I've used the ESAP framework to do this, so that I'm making sure that I'm covering each of these stages. I've made a note about the activities I'm going to do, and the tools I'll use, and then also how I'm going to manage feedback. There are some timings here on the left, and you might notice this adds up to 55 minutes and not the 60 that I have for my lesson. So I've given myself a little bit of just wiggle room, extra time, because something will always take longer. The practice stage is done outside the class, but I do want to give myself 5 minutes just to brief the class and talk about what they're going to do for next time. Your plan might be more or less detailed. If you've already got a way of planning, well, brilliant. If not, you can start with this kind of thing, and they tend to come more shorthand as you go through. Right, I've got my lesson plan. We're going to go to the portal now, and I'll share my screen on the actual product rather than a PowerPoint. So do excuse me, I'm just going to unshare. How do I unshare and you share? Okay, I'm having a slight technical issue. Stop share, that's what I need. There we go. And now I am going to go to the Pearson English portal. Here we go. Now I need to reshare. Dukes. I've lost my, sorry, I've got too many things open. There we go. There's share screen, this one. Share. Yes, good. Okay. So this is the Pearson English portal. You've probably seen it before if you've used a Pearson course in the past couple of years. Can I ask you again, just to pop in the chat, are you familiar with the Pearson English portal already? Okay, brilliant. So this is not, okay. Okay, so a couple of no's and a lot of people yes. Brilliant. Well, if you are familiar and you spot something that you think would be useful for your colleagues on the call, please do mention it in the chat because tips from the classroom are incredibly helpful. Okay, fabulous. So the Pearson English portal is where, as a teacher, actually, and as a student, I see all of the content I have for my course. It's a one-stop shop, if you like. At the top here, there are a couple of extra tabs. There's classes. Now that's where I would go to set up my classes for the test generator that Mary was talking about. The online practice classes are actually set up directly in the My English lab. But for test generator, you go to classes. And then this class schedule is where I would go if I wanted to schedule Zoom classes within the portal. So Zoom is integrated. And once you've synced your Zoom account with the portal, then you can do everything here. But we're not going to look at that today. Mary, I know, because I've seen her present these, has a fantastic walkthrough if you need more help. All right, so I'm a roadmap teacher, so I've got all of the roadmap content here. You can see I've got all of the different levels. Today our lesson is from A2+. So I'm going to go into the A2+ level. Okay. So there's two main tabs here. One is the presentation tool, which is what I would use in class, and then the other is resources. We'll have a quick look at the resources. So these are all of the kind of extra resources that come with the course and help to just add additional sort of flexibility. So the first one, I'm not going to talk through them all in detail, but there's a few things that I think it's worth just drawing attention to. The first one is teaching with roadmap videos. So this is actually for you as the teacher only and not for the students. It's some just help. So you've got a little bit of an introduction, what are the components available, the unit walkthrough, and then again, a little bit of sort of support videos on lots of different topics. And then we go down to the how-to. So these are things that are really specific to roadmap. So how do the core lessons work, the speaking lessons? How do the skills lessons work, and so on? This section is actually presented by one of our authors, Lindsay Warwick, so you'll see her in these videos. So if you're starting out, this is a really good place to get some kind of basic information. Just, yeah, pop them on while you have a coffee one day, perhaps. And then we've got all of the audio, so students' book, workbook, we've got all of the videos. It's worth just mentioning here that for roadmap, the videos are not an integral part of the course book. They're optional, so you can use them or you can not, and yeah, it's not a problem either way. So you'll find the videos themselves here, and then you'll find accompanying worksheets. So let's just click one open. I don't even know what this one is now, but there are a double spread full lesson worksheet for each of the videos. We do also have them in the presentation tool now, if you want to kind of have them interactively. Tests. So we looked at the test generator earlier. You can launch that from here or view the activities. But for the more traditional among you, the PDF and Word versions of the tests are all here as well. Photocopyables. So Roadmap has 9 photocopyables per level. There are 3 for each of the core lessons. There's one on grammar, one on vocabulary, which are, they provide extra practice and they can be used in class, or you could give them for homework. And then there's one that's always a lot more communicative and kind of fun for every lesson. So that's 9 per unit in total. In addition to those copyables, we have an extra worksheet for pronunciation for every unit. There's additional audio and things for that as well. There's, if pronunciation is your bag, there's also pronunciation activities on the app for the student, just to point out. Other things I'd like to mention, now this is A2, so it's not here, but from B1 up, we've got one called mediation here. So if mediation is of importance, so that's the section that was not added, but pulled out and given a focus to in the 2018 update to the CEFR. We have some extra photocopiable lessons on mediation that use one of the listenings or readings from the Develop Your book, but exploit it in a different way, if you'd like to focus on that from B1 upwards. There's all sorts here. You've got a GSE mapping booklet, so if you want to look at all of the learning objectives in the course in great detail, and kind of pre-plan your whole syllabus, then this is probably a really beneficial resource. Okay, enough of resources. I'm now going to open the presentation tool, and today our lesson is lesson 6. So if you haven't seen the presentation tool before, then I just want to point out that there's a couple of things that are quite useful to navigate it. Firstly, up here, you can look at things in different ways. So you can have the pages for the workbook as well, or just the workbook, or just the student's book by ticking. And then this one slider will change the size. So if you want to get a kind of overview of a lesson, then you can make it sort of fairly big on your screen and click through like this. Personally, I like to see a kind of view of the whole unit. So I like to slide it down to small, but it's good to know that you can change it. And I think different, yeah. As we say, roadmap is a flexible course. So we talked about the 3 communicative speaking outcomes, and then they each have a skills lesson that's kind of connected to them. So you'll find that in the presentation tool, they sit next to each other rather than front and back of books. So it's easy to kind of see what's connected to each other. In the lesson that we're going to look at today, that's 6C, a quiet weekend. Yeah, well, we have nothing but quiet weekends these days, but things are opening up. So I've got 2 buttons here. I can plan and I can teach. We'll drop into plan very quickly. Here, there's previews of all of the different activities and the corresponding teacher's notes for the activity. And you can also look at the teacher's notes for the whole lesson plan if you click on here. Obviously, they're also in the teacher's book printed or in the PDFs in the resources. So that's the planning side. Personally, I prefer to plan on the page, so I'm going to go straight to teach. Alrighty. So it will open up on the page view, and the other way to view it is the activities themselves. So this is the lesson goal. As we said, it comes straight from the GSE learning objective, can describe plans and arrangements. The full objective is in the teacher's book in the beginning of the unit, and then we've simplified it in the student's book as we did with the one that we looked at from B1. So discuss weekend plans. What you're going to need for that? Well, probably may and might, and vocab for weekend activities. So navigating the content, there are lots of different ways. So here I am in activity view. I can navigate, sorry, I had all my Zoom windows there, I had to move them out of the way. I can navigate using these little buttons here, and it will just click me through from one activity to the next one. I can also use the lesson flow at the bottom here, and it will show me the whole of the lesson coming up, and I can jump between activities or go to the next one. So I'll jump to here just for fun. I can also go to the page view. So I can open the page view at any point and see the whole page, and then go from the page to the activities by clicking on the hotspots, and I can zoom in and then move around using the hand button. So there's lots of different ways to navigate. All right, so let me zoom out so I can see the lesson. This is the lesson I'm going to be teaching. The whole lesson is designed to be taught in about 90 minutes. But as we know, that's a face-to-face classroom and things just take longer online. So depending on your lesson length, you could maybe plan for 2 sessions of an hour. That gives you a little bit more time to kind of take things gently. And as a reminder, I'm going to be sharing the screen the whole time, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for a lesson. I just share when you need to. If I'm not sharing, I can see my students better. They can see each other. But today's a webinar and you're stuck in the chat box. All right, so I'm going to zoom in and look at exercise 1. Here we go. So the idea is that my students would have the physical book in front of them, or maybe the ebook, so they wouldn't be relying on my screen to see it, but it's here as an option. They could look at their own copy as well if they want. So let's look at exercise 1. It says, look at the photos and discuss the questions. And then it's got photos of sort of things that you might do at the weekend. So this would be the engage part of the lesson, or the engage part that's related to the lesson. So I'd start here with my students and I'd have one of them ask me the questions. And then I'd answer, well, I usually go for a nice walk, meet up with friends or family when it's allowed, and we usually cook a nice meal. Number 2, well, I don't usually wash the car. We have enough rain in this country to do it for us. I try to do a bit of exercise, and so on and so on and so on. So I would model myself first, and then I'd probably get a student to ask another student in front of the whole class. So you've got students modeling it, and then I send them away to the breakout rooms. So I've modeled it myself, I've modeled it with 2 students, and now they know what's expected of them. So using breakout rooms, a few just sort of best practice tips really. Always give a time limit and stick to it, and then send little reminders. So for here, I might set 3 minutes, a minute per question. Always give a listening task for the students who aren't speaking. So it could be making notes, and then they'll report back on their partner maybe. And then what is the teacher? What are you doing apart from setting reminders about how much time is left? Well, you'll be popping in and out of the rooms, making a note of interesting things you hear, and then you can ask students to develop on them when everybody's back together in the class. And when students are back together, we can call on a few to see what they learned about their partner. And then what is everybody else doing? Well, they can write in the chat box every time they hear something they have something in common with, a bit like we did at the start of the session. Right, so let's just have a quick look at the activities. Number 2, read the article. Do the people do the same things as you? All right, so that's a gist task. And then there's number 3, which of the nouns in the box go with do and go and play? So we're looking at activities that that collocate with the verbs. Right. So let's move on to the study part of the lesson. That's the teaching or the presentation or the input, if you like. We have a text to read with the vocabulary contextualized in it. I'm not going to get you to read the whole text, but just maybe 30 seconds just to skim it and get a sense of what kind of language is in there. So yeah, take 30 seconds just to skim the text very quickly. Okay, so in online lessons, there's a lot to be said for getting students to read longer texts out of class before the lesson. So a kind of flipped approach, if you like, keeps the online lesson snappier. This one's not too long, so it's probably okay, but there's still a number of ways that you could approach this task. One way would be have students read it on their own and then write in the chat box if they do the same as any of the people, and that way I know that they've finished. The other way would be to get 7 students to read out the 7 short texts. That would give me a chance to give some pronunciation feedback. You could have students not nominating the next person that they're going to read, so that kind of keeps every student on their toes. They have to pay attention because they might be next. And if the students are being read to, then they can do the task about what do you also like in the chat box. You can ask students if there's any language that needs clarifying, see if other students can clarify it or look in the dictionary. There's a dictionary here. We do encourage dictionary use. If I go to the widgets section, then I've got a bunch of great widgets actually. Dictionary is what we mentioned, so let's bring that up first. Oh, where's my dictionary gone? Oh, my dictionary. Oh no, it's up here. Sorry, it's under a chat box. So here's my dictionary. What will we look up? Let's look up. What might we need to look up here? Gardening. Why not? Unlikely in your context because it's all fairly similar everywhere, but not to worry. So let's look up gardening. We have the entry from Eldos from the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English here. You can maximize that, get the whole thing. You can play the pronunciation, but do remember, like with any screen share, you have to tick that little button to share audio. So I won't do that now because it won't work because I didn't share audio. So dictionaries, brilliant. So apart from checking if there's anything they don't understand, apart from just asking, you can check. So I'd like to check you've understood the text. Can you please write in the chat box a word from the text that means buying something? And hopefully they'll type in shopping. Or I'd like you to type in the chat box something that involves listening to loud music. And hopefully they'll type in clubbing. So different ways to check their understanding, basically. All right, I'm going to scroll back up now to 3, which is the vocabulary exercise, the collocations one. So here they have to put all of these words with the verb that they go with. So again, there's lots of ways that you can do this. The students can do it on their own, tell you when they're done in the chat box, and then you can check with them. For doing that, you could use the interactive. I'm going to close this widgets now. Yeah, so you could just show the answers, fine. But it's quite fun to have a bit of competition occasionally. So you could say, okay, well, I'm going to split you into 3 teams, and I'm going to get my highlighter ready. So that's in the tools here, my teaching tools. I'm going to get my highlighter ready and off we go. So 3 teams, anyone with a first name from A to H. So I don't know, Anya and Helen, you're in team A. Team B, your first name I to Q. So from Ian to Quincy, that's not a first name, whatever. And team C, anyone with a first name from R to Z. So Ronald to Zoe. So remember your team. I'm going to use my widget here to set up my team. So I've closed my widgets, but here we go. I've got scores. I can also set a timer if I want. I might have that open here because we're only going to play for, say, 3 minutes. Now I've got 3 teams, so I'll add an extra team. I could rename them and recolor them if I want, but I don't really need to do that. So I'm going to call out one of these words. If you think, oh, I've closed my highlighter, I'll just get it back up. There we go. So I'm going to call out one of the words. Is everybody aware of which team you're in, by the way? So Susan, you're in team C. Patrick, you must be team B. Does everybody know their team? Team A to H, Team B, I to Q, Team C, R to Z. You're going to have to do this. Well, you don't have to. You are invited to. Right, so I'm going to call out a word. If you know which verb it collocates with, you're going to shout your name and the team name. And then when I call on you to answer, you have to answer immediately. So it's microphones off for this. Any hesitation, move to the next question. Get it wrong, another team could answer. All right, so for example, if I say homework, Alex says, Alex A, do homework. So that's 1 point for team A. So here we go, video games. Okay, so Mary, that's brilliant, but it probably works better if you take the audio off and you'd say, Mary, team B, play video games. Then I go, brilliant, team B gets a point, and so on.
Sorry, we'll do it.
It's all right, we don't have to play the whole game, don't have time, but an idea for kind of spicing it up a little bit, adding a bit of competition. Keep students on their toes, keeps them active. It's always a bit fun. But it can be tempting to turn every activity into a competition. And we need to make sure we've got a balance. So we could also have students put these words into columns on a whiteboard. So we've got a whiteboard here, and then we go back to the teaching tools and the drawing. So I could just draw it and we could work on it together. Or I could in Zoom, hang on, if I can, I'd have to change my screen again, so I won't do this. But I could also give permission to participants to annotate the screen. Do you know how to do that? Bye, Susan. So in Zoom, if you're using Zoom, then I can't show you because it never shows the actual controls. Apparently annotation is permitted for others at the moment. I must have put it on a while ago. But usually there's a little 3 ... more on the top right on the control panel. And there you have the option to enable or disable annotation for others. So you could allow your students to write as well. You could assign 3 different students, each a column. And then you could have other students who aren't writing, maybe they could check or add more for each of the columns, something like that. Okay, so that was the study phase. I'm going to close my timer and close my scoreboard down again and get rid of the whiteboard. That was the study phase. We were reading the text, reacting to the text, and then engaging with the vocabulary in various ways. In the Activate, so we're not quite getting through we're not getting through the lesson today. As I say, I would split it into 2. So the main Activate is going to be next lesson, and it would be this big talk about plans. But I think I've planned this time that it would just be a 60-minute lesson. So my Activate is going to be with these vocabularies items, and I want my students to use the language a bit more freely. In this case, it's speaking. I guess it could be writing as well. So this speaking task would be appropriate for breakout rooms, but there's a few things you'd want to explain first. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So first of all, you'd want to explain follow-up questions. So you'd have a student ask you question 1, and then answer. So which activities do you often do? Well, I often play music, not the guitar. I play the piano very badly. Oh, sorry, I often play music. Yes. So then to explain follow-up questions, you can have students say, okay, well, what else do you want to ask? And I imagine that they might follow up with, or if they don't, you can just prompt. So a follow-up question might be, well, what music do you play? Do you play well? What kind of music do you like, etc. So modeling follow-up questions. So then I'd probably get a student to ask and I'd answer like we did at the beginning. So modeling. And students could put follow-up questions in the chat box so that there's lots of ideas for follow-up questions for all of the topics there and available to them. Again, modelling. So that's the what. Next, the students need to know how long they'll have and how many follow-up questions to attempt. And then who's going to note down their conclusions. So one option is to sort of indirectly nominate a student here. So something like, in your pair, the student with the earliest birthday is going to note down the conclusions. And then they'd have to talk to each other to find out who has the earliest birthday, or the student with the brightest clothes on, and then they have to turn on the cameras. So ways to get them talking incidentally to each other in order to nominate. But so there's quite a lot of setup, but if you dedicate a minute to the setup and it means that the actual activity goes more smoothly, I think it's well worth it. And it's particularly with online and breakout rooms. In a face-to-face class, you can simply kind of scan the room and instantly get a sense of which pairs are listening, who's engaged. But in an online, you don't know until you drop into the breakout room. So it's really important. And if you give very specific instructions and explain what you expect the students to do and what you expect them to show back after the task, then they're much more likely to take it seriously and actually do it, instead of just, well, I was going to say talking about the weekend, but of course that is what you want them to do in this example. So how can we've got 5 minutes, how can we check or ensure students' understanding? Well, you can give the instructions and have them write them down in the chat box. Then they've listened, they've processed, and they've written them, and they have a record. You could call on one student to explain or repeat the instructions orally. Or you can have students just take a screenshot so they have them in the breakout rooms. Or you could even do an activity around the instructions. So you could create a gap fill, read out the instructions, and then have the students complete the key words. So once again, while they're in the rooms, we can pop in and out and note down the language we hear and message the rooms to check our students are okay and on track. Excuse me. Even further, you could have students fill in a shared document like a Google Doc while in the room. And then you can see what they're doing from outside the room. So that's an extra monitoring tool. Or PowerPoint works quite nicely. You could give each breakout room a different slide. Lots of different ways, and I'm sure you've got other ones. So that's the activate section, and the importance of giving clear instructions. As I mentioned at the start, depending on how long your class is and your course, you might split the lesson over 2 classes. So that's where I'm going to stop for today, and where you might stop in your lesson too. If you've got a longer class, maybe you've skipped a couple of activities, maybe you're able to just get through all the way to the end of the lesson. But I definitely want to give students some practice at home. So the next activity here is going to be a listening. So I'll zoom back in. It's introducing the grammar for the next time. And the grammar is going to be may or might. Yeah, may or might. So I'd probably ask my students actually to listen for homework. So they come having already, they've listened to Isabel and Ruth when they come back. So I'd have them listen for homework. We could listen all together when we come back, but I'd have to make sure that I click that little button so that I share my audio. But I'd rather use the in-class time for the communicative activities. And with Roadmap, students have the audio tracks on their version of the resources that we looked at before. They also have an app, so they could use, sorry, I've got my screen blurred, but they've also got a mobile app which has all of the audio with clickable subtitles. Or if they have the ebook, they'll have the files there too. So they have it. So I've set them listening exercise 5 as homework. And I'm also going to assign them activities on the My English Lab and have them do the vocab activities from the app as well. So I think we do just about have time to go to the My English Lab. So I'm going to close down that, go back to my dashboard and have a quick look for 1 minute at the My English Lab. By the way, if you have any questions, please put them in chat, because I don't think we'll have time to pick up questions afterwards. So I'll pick up any now. This might not work actually. I think it's going into a different account, but it's okay, it just has lots. No, there we go. So this is the My English Lab, the online homework. Course is divided again into units. As a teacher, I've also got the tests I can assign. Students won't see that unless I assign them. So I'm in 6C, a quiet weekend. Let me go there, 6C. And I've got a couple of the vocabulary activities. Oh, sorry, no. Yeah, so I can go into the vocabulary activities for 6C. I've also got some grammar, but that will be for next time once I've done the listening. So I don't want them to do this yet. I assign them. Here we go. So this one, they're going to be classifying, just like we did in the student's book, they're going to classify the words. This is the teacher view. I'd have to switch to student view to see what they do. There we go. So they drag and drop down and so on and so on. So I can assign these as homework. Normally it appears here with little boxes, and I'm not quite sure why it's not. So I think that I might have signed in as the wrong type of account. But usually there's little boxes to assign, and it's very simple. And once my students have done it, they will click submit, and they can see what they got right and wrong. They'll get a little tip to see, you know, how they might do it better next time, and so on and so on. So I switch to student view again. So they will do it, and once they are complete, then they'll click submit at the bottom. And then all of their scores are in the grade book. I don't have time to show you the grade book at the moment, but we could do that another time if it's interesting. For now, I think just to say that in the My English Lab, I would have a detailed readout of, at a glance view of how my students did in this specific homework, how they're doing overall, and I could get a report on sort of common errors that they've had. My computer seems to have frozen. I'm not quite sure why. I think I don't think I've closed it down for about 3 days, so that's probably why. So given that we're at time and my computer's frozen, I'm going to try to stop sharing if it'll react to that. There we go. And say thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope there was something in there that was useful to you. If there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or just come off mute and ask. And I'll pass back to Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen, who's just a pigeon's flight away from Mike in North London. So, all right, are there any questions before we say bye-bye to Imogen as she goes to do her glamorous things in North London? Seeing lots of thank you. Thanks, Imogen. Well, there again, you've just done us all proud and made it so crystal clear in a really tight presentation of a roadmap. So for those of you who would like to see Imogen in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland again on Friday, Imogen will be back with us to show us a business partner. Do I hear a question coming in?
Yes. Hello, Imogen. My name is Winfrey MacDonald. I'm from Germany. And I just wanted to ask, is it only possible to do this like over Zoom? Because I also use another platform, you know, Microsoft Teams. Would that work? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I just use Zoom because that's what we're on and we have it integrated. But actually, Zoom mostly for work we use Teams, and I know that they've recently added breakout rooms. So actually, you could do everything over Teams. what I was showing you was our presentation tool, and that you can use in the classroom with a projector, or you can use it over a video conferencing tool like Zoom or Teams, or, you know, there are Google Classroom, or so definitely.
Yeah. Another question. I'm presently working with the university in Germany, and we've got this I'm on this MyLab, yeah, but I'm not on the portal. You know, the how can I get in? What do I need to do?
I think it depends on well, first thing really is contact your rep. So you're in Germany. I'm not sure if it's
Peer
Peer, yeah.
Barber.
So
Yeah.
Peer will work through it in more detail with you. But can I ask which course you're using?
We were doing this. Hang on. Yeah, it's business partner.
Well, business partner does have this as well. So come on Friday and I'll show you what that looks like.
Yeah, thanks. Great. That'll be good. Yeah,
a lot of the things apply to both. So you could also just have a conversation with Peer, and he'll set you up with an account, and you know, very much the same things will apply. Yeah,
I'll do that. Thank you so much, Imogen.
You're very welcome.
Great. Any other questions? All right, then. Imogen, thank you so much, and I'll see you on Friday. And now you're back with me for just one little second. So we have our next session starting with our incredible editor, Joe Hunter, who's going to show us Formula, one of our most innovative courses that I have ever seen in a long time. And I've been teaching since 1987. Yes, since 1987, when I started teaching in France. So we'll take a little break now until 3 o'clock, and then we'll come back together and see what exciting things Joe Hunter is going to show us. So please stay on with us if you'd like.